What do you think would surprise somebody like the most that hasn't visited a refugee camp or hasn't been to like a place of crisis?
I was expecting that I was going to go into these refugee camps and it was going to be very solemn and very sad. And there was definitely an undertone of that because they were displaced people. This is not their home. Maybe they don't have food, they don't have shelter, they don't have a land, honestly, but they have everything else. They have dreams and hopes and fears and thoughts, and they experience the same things we do.
What is that like feeling like being around the people that you are helping directly?
When I'm in Bangladesh and I'm with people, the only difference between me and them is chance. Was lucky in this lottery of life. I said it's hard for everyone to go to the place where crisis is happening and help with their hands, but there are other ways you can help. Like what I did last summer was I went to the Rohingya refugee camp. I helped distribute these Eid food packs to these kids, and seeing how much joy and resilience and hope they have, it feels small and kind of cheap and not have the same hope as them.
You're a disruptive optimist?
I think I'll always say yes. If we don't have hope and if we don't have a vision for something better, we'll never get there. I think if someone is suffering, I will never sit here and say, oh, there's not a solution to their suffering. You have to be the change that you want to see. If someone like you doesn't care a lot, then nothing's gonna happen.
It's Lil Baby.
Welcome to Conversations with Chai. I'm your host, Ram Shali, aka Lil Baby Ram, and today I have with me a representative from Human Concern USA, Maleeha Mahbub.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely, thank you for doing this. I guess for the audience, do you want to kind of explain what Human Concern is? Yeah, go ahead.
So Human Concern is a nonprofit organization, and they do a lot of different kinds of work, from emergency relief work, so like food packs and shelter during disaster situations, but also more long-term programming, so education initiatives and women's health and everything in between.
Do you want to talk about, because obviously Human Concern does like a lot of initiatives like water wells, obviously like the Palestine like relief, right? Is there a project that like you've worked on or observed that like you're particularly close to?
Definitely. I have been to the Rohingya refugee camps multiple times, and ACI does a lot of work there. They have schools and healthcare centers, and they regularly give food. And so part of like what I did last summer was I went to the Rohingya refugee camp, and part of the work I did was I helped distribute these Eid food packs to these kids, and so they get regular food packs from different organizations, but this was special because it was like a food pack specifically for Eid, so it had like special food and a new pair of clothing for them and toys, and it was just so, it's always bittersweet to be in a place that's shaped by so much loss, and especially because it was my third time being there, so it's hard to come back to a place that's supposed to be temporary because it's a refugee camp. But it was an honor to be a part of such a moment of joy because it was such a place of tragedy, obviously, because it was a refugee camp. But I got to be a part of a Eid food pack distribution where these kids were laughing and they were having fun and they were so excited to be receiving them. Yeah.
What is that experience like? Because I think like for somebody like listening, I think that like it's easy to very quickly like donate, right? Because that is like the obviously like the base level most accessible way to have an impact. But I think a lot of people maybe get lost that there is work
Right.
being done on the other end of the donation, right? What is that like feeling like being around the people that you are helping directly?
Yeah, I think this goes for like everything and everyone, but especially when I'm in Bangladesh and I'm with people, I think the thing that rings true for me is that the only difference between me and them is chance. Like there's no merit, or I don't deserve where I am any more than them. I just was lucky in this lottery of life, basically, and I get to be here and they don't. And so it's hard to sit with that because it's uncomfortable, and I think it would be so much easier to look away and just be like, but I think that means that if I have something that they don't and it's just chance, then I have a responsibility to do something with the things that I was given. And it's hard for people to like go and do the work. It's not possible for everyone, and that's understandable, but there's work that you can do from far away. So that means like supporting organizations that are already doing the work on the ground. But also I think meaningful support starts with staying engaged. So like paying attention and caring when a crisis isn't like the headline anymore. Like people refugee communities, especially like the Rohingya refugees, they don't need a savior. They need advocacy and consistency and respect. And you can do that by supporting these organizations that are helping them survive so they can get to a place where they can actually thrive. I think a lot of the times it's very easy to balance like long-term systemic issues with disaster relief. Like for me, especially, I have a hard time being like, well, you know, I'm giving this food to these kids, I'm offering this shelter, but what am I doing long term? Like, this is not solving the systemic issue of genocide.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're there. But sometimes you have to like understand that the first thing you do is you help someone stay alive and you help them survive. And you do that by paying attention.
How do you contextualize like the helplessness of it all? Because I find myself feeling that way around systematic issues, and I don't think I'm like alone in that. I think there's a lot of people of maybe like my age group, our age group, right, that feel like, hey, like these problems are so much larger than any individual work, right? And it kind of feels like, okay, like is this dollar that I'm even donating, is it really moving the needle on this larger like systemic issue that's existed for like hundreds of years before me or you?
Right. And you're right. Like they are these really large systemic issues, and it's hard to be like, well, how am I as a person going to solve this huge thing?
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I think actually a moment that like was so defining for me while I was in the refugee camps over the summer was the place that we were doing this distribution. It was like a community center outside, and the walls on this community center were filled with their art. And one of the girls that I was talking to, I was like, you know, getting to know her, and I was like, where's your art? And she led me to her painting, and it was this drawing of a house, and it was a real house. It was a house with a garden and this big open sky. And it was so bittersweet to be there with her because she was like maybe 7 or 8, so she had never left the camps. She doesn't have a house. She doesn't know. She's only seen the camps and been in a tent. But like being there with them and seeing how much joy and resilience and hope they have, like feels small and kind of cheap to be here and not have the same hope as them. Like I think a lot of times it's easy to kind of reduce refugees especially, as passive people who are receiving aid. But the things that they're doing, just surviving, is resilience. Like they are doing so much work, and the least that we can do is just support them, give them the support that they need. Yeah.
I think that is a really good point that like I want you to kind of like dive a little bit like deeper into, because I think that the humanization of people that are, again, like receiving aid, right, is an important distinction and an important observation to make. And I think like obviously you're able to make that observation because you are actually meeting the people. Because I think a lot of times, like even in like, I think about like obviously like Ramadan just passed, right, and people are systematically like donating, which is a good thing, right? Like they're just like with like clockwork saying like, hey, every Friday or every day I'm just going to donate this amount, and that is a good thing, and I don't want to take away from that. But I think what gets lost on that is like the actual impact on like the person that you're helping, right? Like mentally, like to kind of keep that like intention. Do you like, I think like obviously like being able to meet folks, right? Like how do you think that like somebody can still stay engaged without actually going to a refugee camp, right? Like how am I able to like make sure that like my donation is not just like a systematic like, hey, I'm just giving money, but hey, I'm intentionally thinking about where this money is going and who this is helping?
Well, I think there's two parts to this. I think the first part is listening. I think a lot of the times the people who are actually like requiring this aid are often like overlooked or they're spoken over. And I think the easiest way for you to connect with someone and understand what's happening and where your support is going is by listening to the people who need it. And then the second part is like, you don't need, I think, again, like I said, it's hard for everyone to go to the place where crisis is happening and to help with their hands, but there are other ways you can help. And probably the most important way is like supporting organizations that are already doing the work on the ground. And there's so much information that they can provide you if you ask for it. So like I know for ACI, like they will let you know where your money is going and how it's being used, and you can actually specify, like, I don't want this money to be used for, you know, this cause. I want it to be specifically for, like, food in this area, or I want it to be specifically for education in this specific region. So yeah.
What do you think would surprise somebody like the most that hasn't visited like a refugee camp or hasn't been to like a place of crisis? Like, what do you think like surprised you the most, like being there, visiting it?
Yeah, I think honestly it was how much joy there was. And again, it was so bittersweet to be in a place that was shaped by so much loss, but also like there are so many children there and they don't know anything else, and they hold so much joy and hope for whatever is going to come next. And I was expecting that I was going to go into these refugee camps and it was going to be very solemn and very sad. And there was definitely an undertone of that because they were displaced people. This is not their home. But at the same time, it was so loud because there was always children playing somewhere. They were screaming and laughing, and especially when I went, it was right before Eid. I think it's so easy to like take people who are asking for something, who need something, to imagine them as like sad people with nothing else. But these people maybe they don't have food, they don't have shelter, they don't have a land, honestly, but they have everything else. They have dreams and hopes and fears and thoughts, and they experience the same things we do. And I think often if we take away the fact, like if we don't acknowledge the fact that they're able, they have the ability to be happy and to laugh and to have joy, it like dehumanizes them a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that even like obviously like Eid just passed, right? And seeing like videos of like people that are so displaced, and you're like, I can't even imagine, like, I think like just sitting from like the privilege of where we sit at, we're thinking like, if my life looked like that, like would I have any joy? Like it's just like, I think about like if I have like a bad day, how enable I am to like see like the benefit and see the good. And it's like there's people that are being consistently bombarded that are still celebrating Eid and still celebrate, and as they should, right? Because that is like, I think somebody was saying like that is like a act of resilience, right? Like joy is an act of resilience. Like to understand, I think like because the goal is like, hey, you just stop living before you actually stop living. And it's like it's like no, like you should still laugh and like as much as possible, right? Because like that is what they're trying to take away from you essentially.
And I think that all just goes back to like this idea that we don't have, I think it's so easy to forget that we're literally here because of chance. Like the only thing that's different between us and anyone else is just chance, and they deserve the ability to do whatever we're doing just as much. But at the same time, like if the only difference between us is chance, then we were given things that they weren't. We have a responsibility to use the privilege that we have to do something about it. So
I think it being chance is, I think about that a lot for just being, I think like if you're like brown or black, right, like your chances of living a very different life, it's so marginal. Like I think about like where my dad came from, right, like I'm talking like just a generation ahead. Like I'm thinking about like where my dad came from, right? Like I'm talking like tin house in the village, right? And I'm like, I'm only like maybe 2 or 3 choices away from like living just that life. And that's not, you know what I'm saying, like in terms of like the great scheme.
And that's crazy to think about.
It's insane because I think like we lose sight of that, especially like if you're born here or if you've like lived a majority of your life in the US, you forget like, hey, I'm only 1 or 2 choices away from somebody down the line like just making a specific choice.
But I think it helps contextualize like where we are so well, to have that, like to have the ability to be like, oh, like I'm so close to having a different life. Like there are so many things that would have put me somewhere completely different, and I think it gives you the ability to empathize with people so much better.
I don't think that should get lost. I think like we're always like, we think like we're almost like untouchable and immortal being in like the US, right? Like we're so insulated, and I'm like, we're only a few decisions away from our like lives looking very, very like different, right? Like there's so much privilege that comes with just like being here, having like a set of parents. Like there's so much privilege that comes with like every single aspect. Like And I'm just like, that shouldn't be lost. And I think that that's why it's important for people to be engaged outside of just the charitable like version of like giving, because it's like it recontextualizes like your human experience.
Right. Yeah. I think also like, I think often a lot of times when it comes to service, people kind of simplify it a little bit, and I understand where it's coming from, where you want to go somewhere, do the work, leave, and feel better about yourself, but really I think most of the work happens after. A lot of the issues that, you know, I work with and a lot of things that I've seen, they're long term, and that means that your donation is so helpful, but it's not enough. Because if something is long term, if a problem is long term, then the solution also has to be long term. And if you're part of that solution, then you need to be engaged with it long term. And so I think that's where like it goes beyond just, you know, donating. It goes beyond just even volunteering. So much of helping is staying engaged and listening and like making sure that you care. I mean, it's so easy to like feel distant and look away, especially when like looking away would be easier. It's hard to stay engaged with things that are heavy. Like, this is a heavy thing. You don't want to hear about people dying and people being sick and people struggling all the time. But that's how you make sure that that someone is paying attention. If no one is paying attention, then nothing's gonna happen.
We had a conversation a couple months ago, right? And I know that you have an interest, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, right? Like, do you believe that some of the long-term systematic issues that we are discussing, do they have long-term fixes in your mind that we can actually march towards? Because I honestly sometimes, like, again, back to the conversation of like, it always feels like you're putting a band-aid on like such larger wounds, right? It's like, do you believe, like, obviously, like, you're in policy, right? Like, you have an interest in policy, right? Do you believe that there's long-term systematic fixes?
I think that I might be a destructive optimist. So my answer.
You're a disruptive optimist?
I think I'm a destructive optimist.
Okay.
In the sense that I think I'll always say yes.
Okay.
But part of that is if we don't have hope and if we don't have a vision for something better, we'll never get there. And I think it's very dangerous to sit here and say, you know, I don't think there's a solution to this problem when so many people are suffering. I think if someone is suffering, I will never sit here and say, oh, there's not a solution to their suffering. Because even if I myself cannot do something to solve the overarching problem, I can help ease that suffering. Now, if the question is there a long-term solution? I think yes, but it's layered. I think part of that long-term solution is paying attention and caring, because so many things get overlooked and then there's not a push for it to be resolved because people look away. And I think that's especially true with the Rohingya refugees, because it was such a textbook genocide. It was so overwhelmingly, oh, like, you did something bad. Like, this is not, I don't even think there's a conversation here to be had. It was a genocide. But no one knows about it. And it happened in 2017, so it's been like 7 years. The solution here would be to push back, to say to the Myanmar government and to everyone that this is not something that should be happening. They need their land back. They need to be back where their home is. But people looked away, and that's not a fault of any individual person. It's not even a fault of someone who can admit, like, I just, you know, I have a lot going on. I think it's just, I don't know, I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. I think when it comes to putting band-aids on an overwhelming, like, big, like, addressing symptoms of a problem rather than the actual cause, it's complicated when those symptoms are human suffering, because you're right that the symptoms of this larger cause of genocide, of you know, all of these things.
I think that, like, I think it's interesting because, like, you're a destructive optimist, right? And I always like to believe, and I think that this is where, like, there may be, like, a gap in my understanding, and there might just be a gap in, like, general. I think that there's a lot of times where I like to believe that there's people that are working on larger solutions, and I think what I end up realizing most of the time, like, there isn't, right?
Yeah.
Like, I would think that, like, because I know what the right thing to do is, for example, with the Rohingya crisis, right? Like, that's a genocide. And I'm thinking, like, there's somebody larger at a bigger table that
Yeah.
is thinking of a solution for this because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But then, and I think that's when like you take your eye off of the
Right.
ball, right? Because you're just like, okay, like this is not my problem in the
Yeah.
world to solve.
Yeah.
It's somebody's. I hope it's somebody's problem
Right.
on the earth
Yeah.
to solve, right?
I think probably the worst thing that I've ever come to terms with is that there is no one else. And honestly, like, it's so cliche because you hear it all the time, and you know it feels like something that I associate with elementary school. But like, you have to be the change that you want to see, and that's never truer than like right now, because there is no bigger person. Like, you need to do what you think. I have this quote from the Lorax, and I'm a big environmental person, but I think it rings true everywhere, and I see it every day. And it's just like, if someone like you doesn't care a lot, then nothing's gonna happen. And I think that's true in every situation, but especially in situations like this. Like, it's so easy to write this off as someone else's problem. Like, I'm sure there's someone smarter, someone more powerful, someone who is better versed in policy and all of these things who can take care of this. But there isn't.
And I think that is the harsh reality that most of us probably have to accept and understand, because with just thinking that somebody else is going to change
Right.
it is the reason that like essentially like inaction
Yeah.
is the worst
Yeah.
action, right? Because I think like anytime that there is like a lot of momentum for a movement or momentum for an initiative, it gets lost in, okay, like I've done my part because I think that this is the max that I can do.
Yeah.
Whether it's like financially, whether it's like this is the max contribution to this cause that I do care about, right? And somebody else's max contribution will be the
Right.
actual change.
Yeah.